Hello, fellow oracles. It's Jen Harris once more, yet again, and still with my 10-minute take. Now, for those of you who have not been hiding under a rock the last 24 hours, the revamp, or as it's being touted, the spiritual sequel for Candyman, the original horror movie that was released in 1992, the new trailer under Monkey Paw Productions has made its rounds on the internet. Now, for those of you who are a fan of Jordan Peele, like myself, know that he had talked about, his passion and his desire to redo Candyman, right? So, with clearly the brilliant African American director Nia DaCosta, they have now shooketh the internet. The one thing that I find interesting about this revamp is how detailed it is, because there are certain things about Candyman that you see in the trailer that you would not know or notice if you had not watched the first three movies. And we all know that Tony Todd is the scariest black man in the world now, right? I remember watching when Candyman came out. I personally was in like 6th grade, so again, that's so many odd years ago, almost 30 years ago now. So I remember how utterly effing scary it was. Because I remember there were people that I went to school with. Again, we were a bunch of 6th graders who they would do the dare in the bathroom, and then somebody would like cut off the lights and like make noise, all stupid stuff that kids do. But there was such a realism and an applicable realism to this particular story that you don't even see until you watch the second movie, which actually details how this particular person got to be what is, I guess you could call, a vengeful spirit. So my advice to you, if you necessarily want to venture to see the first three movies before you watch the Nia DaCosta and Jordan Peele flick, by all means do that. But my take on it is really as follows. One, I am very excited for what Monkey Paw Productions is doing. I am here for everything Jordan Peele is doing. There is a stylized realism to this particular movie that I am liking, that I am loving, and that I am pretty much a fan of anything that he's a part of, because there is a twisted brilliance to everything that Jordan Peele does. He'll pull things from pop culture, he'll pull things from all the books that he's read, and then make these strange parallel universes, which is why I think that CBS did the right thing by letting him revamp the Twilight Zone. I think that only a person who's able to marry what they've read, what they've seen with their own, and stare in their own experiences, can be able to do something on the level that he's being able to do it. What I also think about the revamp is, one, it's time. For whatever reason, everything 1990s is cool now. It's being re-examined. Even the Disney movies that came out then, The Lion King and Aladdin and even Child's Play. I don't know why they keep making Chucky movies. I really don't, but that's neither here nor there. The thing that I find interesting is that a black woman is directing this movie. Now, that is dope. That is dope. I think there needs to be more opportunities given to black women in order to, again, garner this kind of support that's needed for the arts. What does that mean? That means that horror movies should not always be relegated to white men to direct. Now, those of you who followed the lore for a minute, and I had to actually refresh myself this morning, the original Candyman movie was actually written by, the screenplay was written by Clive Barker, who's brilliant, and Bernard Rose. The movie is based on Clive Barker's short story called The Forbidden. Yeah, The Forbidden. Sorry, my notes are over there. So from that came the screenplay. Now, the fact that Clive Barker created this is testament to his own, twisted brilliance, as it were. And also, this other particular writer is making a resurgence as well. the dynamic and utterly brilliant Octavia Butler, who left us about, almost 20 years ago now. She said, as far as writing horror and speculative fiction, she said that I know that I am a rare bird. And she also said that the reason why she wrote about power so much is because she felt she has so little. One of my other writing sheroes, Tananarive, who I encourage any Black writer to follow on Twitter, she says often about this particular genre that there needs to be more representation amongst people of color, namely African American people. You've all heard me say this also. There is a book called Horror Noir, and also the Shudder, I believe the documentary is still on Shudder, called Horror Noir, that Tananarive is actually on the executive creative board for, that actually parallels horror movies with a Black lens. Now, what does that mean? There's a quote in the documentary that says, "Black history is Black horror," and Tananarive says, "Black people have always loved horror. Horror hasn't always loved us." So in this particular documentary, they talk about tropes, they talk about classic movies, and they also talk about how Black people have been depicted through these particular movies, starting with Birth of a Nation and ending with Get Out. So I encourage all you film students, all you burgeoning screenwriters, all you freelance writers, to go ahead and watch that documentary as well. So that way, when you do your analysis, you can actually pull together, again, your experience with what you've read, with what you've actually seen. I personally am hyped to see it. I told some friends of mine, I said, look, the rules of Blackness said you cannot go see a Jordan Peele movie or a Jordan Peele affiliated movie by yourself. It's better to go in a group. It's better to go with people, because when you leave, you will need somebody to help you diffuse. I promise you. But in that, I'm excited for this movie. I think that the casting is epic. I think the fact that they have Vanessa Williams in it is amazing. For those of you who are a fan of the movie, she was in the first movie. Tony Todd is supposed to be in the movie as well. I am excited for this. I really, truly am. As a writer, I am excited for this. The one thing that I must say and must remind you all is that for people of color, for Black people to write horror does not make them wanting to be white. I have to reiterate that. What you all need to know is, and what we all as a culture have to embrace is, not all of us are bent toward the happily ever after. I said this in a live about 2 years ago, that there are Black folks who have these dark imaginations. That does not mean they don't love God. That does not mean they are bankrupt of a moral core. That doesn't mean they're obsessed with the occult. Some people's imagination isn't bent toward the happily ever after. And that's okay too, because those stories still have to be told. There are still things that we as a culture are working through, and sometimes those things can only be worked through if you see them on screen and in media. And if you as a Black person are controlling how that depiction looks, i.e., if a Black person wrote this movie, I think a Black person should be directing it. Because there are cultural colloquialisms, there are cultural factors that go into these movies, especially when you deal with horror, right? Especially with that. From what I have seen in the trailer, this is going to be dope. If it's done right, it will be epic. And I believe it will be epic. But I'll be remiss in my duty as a space holder, as a teacher, as a mentor, to not remind you all also to follow Nightlight on wherever you get your podcast. The host, the executive producer of the show, Tanya Thompson, who is a dear friend of mine, she actually started that podcast, and I believe it's in season 2. So I admonish you all, if you still need a little bit more creepy in your day, go ahead and follow that. It's available wherever you get your podcast. I listen on Apple Podcasts, but I believe it's on SoundCloud. I believe it's on Stitcher, and I know it's on Google Play. So go ahead and do that. But Candyman, the 2020 revamp, I am here for. Support Black writers. Support Jordan Peele, support Nia DaCosta. I hope that I see more of her work, because just like we amp up Ava DuVernay, let's amp up Nia as well. Y'all have a great one.